Hey, Joe.
Hey, nice to meet you.
How are you?
I am doing good. Well, it's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Okay, I'm starting.
Yeah.
Okay. So, um, I understand what your organization is trying to reach and trying to dispel the misinformation about vaccines. And I believe one of the decisions that some groups or some people may have are the myths about them causing autism or any other additional health issues. So, can you talk about um, what are the biggest misconceptions and just put dispelling if vaccines cause those types of medical conditions?
Yeah, that is still happening. There is still a lot of misinformation about vaccines, like causing autism, like you said, or causing other conditions. But there's a lot of new talking points too that came up during the pandemic. A lot of new misinformation spread by those the same groups that talk about vaccines causing autism, and new groups. The landscape's changed a lot in terms of who's making misinformation and who's spreading it. A lot changed in 2020 that I think we're going to have to deal with for a really long time to come. But yeah, to start, I mean, that is really heavily studied, the link between vaccines and autism, and is there a link? And there's been lots of studies funded by the U.S. government, but also done in universities and also done outside the U.S. by other groups, and no one's been able to find a link between vaccines and autism. What kicked it all off was there was an unethical researcher who was British, who published a study claiming that there was a link. And that kind of set off this firestorm around the world, because rightly, a lot of parents got really worried that there was a link. But he was a medical doctor, and he had his medical license removed because other scientists came in and said, you made up your research. Unfortunately, he's still around, and other people like him are still around, and they're clinging on the little bit of credibility that they have with fringe groups, and they're still saying the same stuff. So you still hear it.
Yeah.
But you hear a lot of other stuff too. But yeah, there's been no link with vaccines, any vaccine, and any kind of illness like autism or death, or any negative effects of vaccines, really, to speak of, in terms of all the things that we have in public health to prevent illnesses, because vaccines are given to healthy people. People who don't have the illness. It's one of the most effective interventions that the world's ever made for itself. So I'm a big fan of vaccines.
Yeah, I read a little bit about the flaws within that study that
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, was that back in 2004? Was it that recent?
Yeah, it was in the 90s.
Okay.
Yeah, and then it was kind of debunked in the early 2000s.
Yeah. And because that's still, I think about that because I have younger kids. I have a 3 and a 7-year-old. Now, I'm not an anti-vaxxer, and I'm also not, I'm in the middle, if you will. As far as myself, I didn't get the flu shot this year. I just didn't. But my kids are up to date on their vaccines. Mm-hmm. But again, as far as the information that's out there, some can be misleading, some, is just outright wrong. But do you know what type of measures are being taken to prevent miscommunication or misinformation, whether that's preventing those companies or organizations from getting advertisement? Is there anything like that out there to prevent misinformation?
There is. It's all really new, though, and it isn't enough. So right now, we're totally overwhelmed. It was a problem before the pandemic, and it's a much bigger problem now. So like the United Nations pays attention to misinformation circulating around, but it just started to do that, And in public health in the US, it's never paid attention to misinformation either. It just started to do it. And all that happened in 2020. So we don't have a lot of experience countering it. And actually the people who understand it the best right now are people who study propaganda, who study kind of like foreign government influence on elections and that kind of stuff. That's where most of the good strategies and learnings come from. But yeah, you've probably seen the same stuff I've seen. Like social media companies are trying to get better at it, and they're trying to prevent groups that, you know, like run ads trying to convince people that vaccines are unsafe. They won't let them run an ad anymore. But it's really a hodgepodge mix of on every social media company, it's a little bit different. And in every country, it's a little bit different. I don't think we've figured it out at all. And I also don't think we have a good answer for it either. Usually scientists take a really long time before they say anything because they want to make sure what they say is right. But there's no criteria like that that's keeping people from spreading misinformation or making a new fake documentary or a meme or whatever it is. You can just do it, and you can put it out, and if it's catchy and is salacious and is linked to a conspiracy theory, it often gets shared a lot faster than boring truth. So that's what we're up against. It's really challenging. And like I said earlier, I think I think 2021 is going to be kind of like the year of anti-vaxxers. There's hundreds of private Facebook groups and WhatsApp channels and TikTokers and Snapchatters and Tumblrs and everything. And they're all out there taking their talking points from a pretty small group of people and groups who tell everybody else what to think and what to say. Yeah. And that this is like Christmas for them. They've been waiting for. They've been against vaccines since the beginning. And now the US is trying to vaccinate more people than ever before. And so they're ready for it, and they have all their talking points ready. And they're just kind of sitting there waiting for anything that might convince somebody who's on the fence not to get vaccinated, or not to trust scientists, or not to trust the government, or there's, lots of different ways they attack it. Yeah. Whereas usually like scientists have one way to talk about it, and that's really the only way we talk about it.
and with that, anti-vaxxers, there's a whole different subgroup of anti-vaxxers, whether that's, I don't want to take the vaccine because I don't want to be told what to do. It's my body. I can, it's my choice. Then you have the others where I eat pretty healthy diet. My immune system, for the most part, I don't get sick, so they don't feel like they need a toxin in their body. Then you have those that are worried about data and how it will be used in the future. Like, I think there's new technology that may be coming out as far as apps that will say, "Oh, I've been vaccinated." Like if you get on a plane, certain airlines may require that, and people don't want to be tracked.
Right.
And then you have those that, like you said, don't trust the government, right? Like for the Black community, African Americans, there was this Tuskegee trial that went on for over 40 years. And then you have, I believe it was birth control study in Puerto Rico. So you just have all these different subgroups of anti-vaxxers. And I guess my question would be, what's the best message? Like, what's the messaging to get clear information on particularly this vaccine that's new and that's out now?
I think it's less okay to be really worried about vaccines that have been around for a long time. Because sort of like asked and answered when it comes to like a lot of the vaccines that have been around for decades. So much studies, so many, so many people working really, really hard to show that they're okay. And people with really good intention who aren't, who really are stand-up people. But with COVID-19 vaccines, I totally get being hesitant about it. And I think that's actually totally appropriate. They were made fast. The name of the process that made them is a horrible name, Operation Warp Speed. Nobody thinks of speed and safety. Those two things don't go together. And it was the administration that was in charge of talking about it was, we all know, spreading a lot of misinformation at the same time. So those two things are now linked together. I think if you combine that too with, I wish that people would trust me because of my training, like as a scientist, because I've got the right letters after my name. But I also know that that's not realistic. And I don't think I think it's particularly not realistic if we're talking about, like your example of the Black community. I think trust has to be earned. And I think it comes from actions, not words. Mm-hmm. And I think public health and government have a really, really bad legacy of immoral, unethical actions taken against the Black community in the United States. And so I don't think it would be appropriate for me to ask anybody to trust me. I think the only thing that would be appropriate would be to say, you don't know me. This is the first time we're talking, and you don't know who I am, and you have no basis to trust anything that I say. And I think that's the right way to come into the interaction, the conversation between us. But I think just like in real life, if someone that you do trust says, you can trust Joe, I know him, or I think the same thing as Joe, and so he's probably on the level, then I think that's where we need to start from, especially with communities that have long legacies of being abused and mistreated, and like the Black community. And so I would say, like the National Medical Association, like associations of like Black physicians and Black scientists who took the time to double check and verify that what the FDA said was true, and that, yeah, these vaccines are safe and we think everybody should take them. I think it's when groups like that have stepped up and worked really hard to do their own science, that's what I would hope people would pay attention to, not what I say. So yeah, I actually, like I said, I think hesitancy is totally okay and totally normal. And I can talk, I think we all hear the same talking points, like the research that went into making these had been around for decades. And the reasons vaccines take 10 or 15 years to make is usually there's not enough money and there's not enough people who sign up to be in the trial. And both those things went away for this. And so we got a vaccine much faster. Those things are all true, but I think it's not really about the message to me. It's more, because I think people hear that, and I think like people hear that stuff, and I don't think that's new. I think it's more about the messenger than the message. Just like everything in life, like I'm maybe a particular group of people would listen to me, and that's great. But if I'm like wearing a uniform and I'm in front of an American flag and I'm telling everyone in the same way to go get a COVID-19 vaccine, I have no right to be upset if a lot of people don't listen to what I say, because there needs to be 1,000 other people in their own ways saying it in a way that makes sense to people who already know them and already trust them. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. I think it's like 1,000 different messages from 1,000 different people.
That makes sense. Because sometimes you just get one message. And even with the FDA emergency approval, I wondered what was taken out in order to get things pushed fast.
Yeah.
To be honest, I didn't hear the message that there's money, a whole lot of money being thrown at it, or people are signing up for these trials. Like that never came to my mind. It was always something that left a question.
Yeah.
So anyway, but it makes sense of what you just said. And I wonder, is there a certain group of the population that should get vaccinated? That way we help with the herd immunity. Just we were talking about the mistrust with the government. I know a lot of the African-American community feels that way. And then this is a new drug or a new vaccine that feels rushed. So is it important for one group to get it versus the other?
Well, I mean, we know like to get herd immunity, it's going to be basically we gotta get almost everybody to get it. Like huge millions of people need to get it. I think the only way that's realistic is we don't put barriers up for people to get it. Like I think the most ethical way to do it would be give it to community organizations, give it to trusted institutions, give it to local churches, give it to whoever can get it to people who knows the community well. And then don't ask people to show up and prove who they are. Don't ask people to fill out a whole bunch of paperwork. Just get it in somebody's arm if they want it. And like we had to come up with a way to think it through like a business, you know, like who do we prioritize? Who should be first in line? And like we all saw that older people have been dying at a lot higher rate than other people. And I think we all felt like that we should start there. And that's great. And there's people on both sides of that debate, but I do think it's important too, personally. I lost my grandfather during this pandemic, and that was really painful. And we couldn't be with him as he was passing away, and we couldn't even go to the funeral. There was no funeral because we couldn't. They wouldn't let people into the cemetery. I don't want other people to go through that, so I like the idea of elderly people getting vaccinated. But I guess I look at it like people who've been on the front lines, who have been exposed to this thing more than anybody else, communities that have been historically disenfranchised, they should be first in line. And because like if I want to get a vaccine, it's going to be easier for me as an individual than a lot of other people. I have a car, I have a job, I can take time off of work. For people who like there's 100 reasons why they can't go out and get a vaccine, even if they really want one. It should be made the easiest thing in the world. It should be the equivalent of going through the McDonald's drive-through. And I think unless we do that, we're not going to get to the level that we need. So that's how I feel. We kind of should just open up the floodgates and make it easy.
It's even hard to get. I'm still trying to make my mom an appointment in the county that I live, but I can't. They're all filled up.
Yep. It's the same with me, by the way. Both my parents are 65 and older, and they haven't been able to get vaccinated either. Yeah.
And
did you want to ask him about some of the stuff you said?
Oh, okay. Yeah. So, striking headline that the New York Post did. I wasn't able to read the full story, but the headline was just enough, right? Like
it was striking.
Yeah, 23 people in Norway die after receiving the COVID.
Yeah.
The virus of COVID. Vaccine. So I don't know if the jury is still out on the cause of death. But you hear that and you you kind of put a break on if you wanted to get it. So I don't know if you can talk to anything about truth about that.
Well, I have what eventually happened.
Okay.
So I could talk about that a little bit.
Okay.
It ended up being, I think, like 33 people. But it wasn't in one nursing home. It was across the country.
Okay.
And Norway started by vaccinating the oldest and the most frail. Mm-hmm. And so what happened was some people died like a week after they got the vaccine. And so the government decided to be really careful, and they made a public announcement about it, and then they studied what happened. Like deployed an army of people to figure out was there any link to the vaccine. So what they've come up with so far, and their findings are now final, so like we can talk about it, and it's been reported since then, is that the vaccine didn't cause any of the deaths. Mm-hmm. We should expect there to always be people who are, if we're vaccinating very old people who oftentimes are very frail and sometimes very ill, a number of them are going to die after they get vaccinated, because that's just how it always goes. They're going to pass away anyway, and the two things aren't linked. But they did say we need to pay attention, even though we were not able to find a link between them getting vaccinated and them dying. because some people, like a minority of people, will get a fever after they get a vaccine, or they might get diarrhea. And that's not everybody, that's a small percentage. But if you're really old and really frail and you get a fever or you get diarrhea, that might be a contributing factor to you passing away. That might be the straw that breaks the camel's back. And so that's really kind of like what Norway's scientists are telling the world. And here in the US, I think there's a lot of people paying attention to that too. And there were some people actually who said that we shouldn't vaccinate elderly people first, because we just know deaths are going to happen shortly after people get vaccinated, and it would increase hesitancy. And it would make people really worried about it. And so they were saying we should start with like frontline workers first. But ultimately we decided not to do that as a country. And I think, you know, again, like for good ethical reasons, we decided not to do it that way. But we're going to keep seeing this. We're going to vaccinate millions and millions of people. A lot of those people are going to be older, and we're going to start seeing that people are dying the same day as they get vaccinated. I think the big thing is, do the number of people who die, is it a higher number than what we would see if we weren't vaccinating people? Is it like the number you would expect to see? And so far it's the number we would expect to see. But if it gets higher, then yeah, like it should stop and we should figure out what's going on and we should take the steps after that. But so far there's not any evidence to show that these vaccines are causing deaths. And you might have seen too, like the news, there was a clinic in San Diego where people had allergic reactions. Shut it down, studied it, seeing what's going on, and then they'll start again if they can, if it's safe. I think as long as we just keep doing that, like I wish people would look at what would happen after something like that happens. And I wish that that would make people feel more confident. Like every single time something's happened, it's been reported in the news. There's been a whole bunch of people that have studied it. So that makes me more confident, not less confident, personally.
And can you just explain why vaccines are important?
Yeah. Do you mean specifically to COVID-19?
Well, I guess in general, because we're in a state where we need to get back to normal.
Yeah.
And I feel like most people who may not want it, but want to get back to normal, would just go ahead and get it.
Yeah.
But just overall, why is it important that we either vaccinate ourselves and our children?
Yeah. I think there are so many reasons it's important. If you care about the economy, even if you don't care a lot about the pandemic, and I'm not talking about you, but just somebody.
Yeah.
If somebody doesn't care about the pandemic all that much, or is like skeptical that it's as big a deal as what they're hearing, that person probably cares about small businesses reopening and the economy coming back and people getting their jobs back. And if getting a vaccine is the way that that's going to happen, then great. Let's all get a vaccine just for business reasons, just for the economy to get started up again. I care about the economy, but as a public health person, where I'm looking at it is mostly like, this is a virus that's killed hundreds of thousands of people. And I don't want any more people to die. And that's, for me, it's as simple as that. And I had COVID-19. In March, I got it. It was miserable. I had a hard time breathing, all the things that you read about. And I can tell you, when I was laying there and I was having a hard time breathing, I didn't want to die, and that was scary. The thing I was most worried about was that I had gotten someone else sick, and that I hadn't known about it, because I didn't know I was sick. And so I interacted with people without wearing a mask at the time. And that was horrible to carry with me. And it ended up fine, and no one ended up getting sick, and no one died. Thank God. But I think there's lots of reasons to care. I feel like it's being a good community member and a good family member. I don't want to get someone sick, and maybe I'm not going to get really sick, but I might come in contact with somebody who I didn't know had asthma or diabetes, and I might kill them by just not knowing I was carrying it around. And living with that would be really difficult for me, and I think for most people. And then also, I don't want to be scared anymore. I'm tired of being scared. It feels like it's been a heavy blanket on me for a year of worrying about, am I wearing my mask right? And I'm going to go grocery shopping for my household. And how long should I be in the grocery store? And am I exposing myself? I just want that to go away. I don't want to have to be worried anymore. So I think there's lots of reasons to get vaccinated.
And then lastly, and I know it's in its infancy, because I don't believe there's any children that have been a part of the trials yet, but do you feel that there will be a push to make the vaccine mandatory or on the schedule for the children's vaccination to require? Because I know that most schools and childcare requires vaccinated children.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's going to be a big push for this specific vaccine.
I don't think so. I haven't heard anybody talking about it, like anybody who's like in the government or the public world talking about it. What I have heard about is my mom just retired from being a school district superintendent. My dad was a teacher. My brother was a teacher. What I've heard is the need to protect the essential workers who work in schools. It's not so much about the kids. So I don't think we're going to see any kind of mandatory vaccinations for kids, but what we might see is teachers need to get vaccinated, or, just so like bus drivers don't die, or lunch ladies don't die, just keeping people alive. So that's, if anything happens, I think it's going to be that. I don't think it'll be kids mandatory. I don't think we'll do that.
Joy, I was wondering if based on his expertise and what he does is this combating disinformation, I wonder if it might be worth asking if he has other examples similar to the New York Post one, and where they originate from. Like, are there a million groups, or is it just like one or two?
Did you hear that?
Yeah. I wasn't sure if you were just going to say it exactly the same. So this is like it's like an evolving landscape. And a lot is different now than it was. People who are opposed to vaccines in 2019, there's like double the number of them now, and double the number of organizations. And now there are anti-government groups and militias and racist organizations, white supremacist organizations, and conspiracy groups that are all also against vaccines for their own reasons. And so anti-vaxxers is like the definition has changed in 2020 during the pandemic. And like I said, I think that's going to be with us for a really long time. But when we look at, okay, this piece of misinformation about a vaccine, like who created it and where did it go? What we're seeing is, there are thousands of little groups of people that all they all say the same thing. They use the same talking points. But the people who create the talking points are a smaller group of people. And some of them have been around since the 90s, and they're super famous for being against vaccines. Some of them are new because they came around during the pandemic for their own reasons. But we know who they are, and we know why they're saying what they're saying. And really and I'm not talking about like the mom who's concerned about her kids. Yeah. I'm talking about like who created the link between vaccines and autism, for example, and how did that get to the mom who's concerned about her kids? And for those people, it's money, power, and influence. And they don't give a crap about anybody. It's about making money, making sure people watch their YouTube videos so that they get ad money, and read their articles so that they get ad money. It's about influence. They want to be listened to and respected and admired. They want to be viewed as like the only person who knows the real truth. And they care a lot about that. And power, political power. They want people to fear them, and they want their opinion to matter. And I kind of get some of that. But where my sympathy sort of ends is when you're hurting other people So for me, it goes past your First Amendment right to say whatever you want to say. And I feel like there's that old saying, like, your right to throw a punch ends at another person's nose. And that's how I feel about this stuff, is like, you can believe that vaccines cause autism. Okay. But the second you're making a documentary about it or doing a bus tour across the United States about it and convincing a whole bunch of people that what you're saying is true, then that's like where it needs to stop from where I sit. So, and I don't think that's what we've reconciled with as a country yet, is what is protected by your right to free speech, and when is it not okay? Like, when does it get to a point where like somebody has to stop it? For example, like the FDA prevents groups from saying that, from false advertising. If you say like this vitamin is going to cure your cancer, they say like you need to take that off your website. But right now you can say Bill Gates is putting microchips in vaccines, and the mRNA vaccines are going to change your DNA, and you can make television shows about it and talk about it on your YouTube channel, and nothing happens. So that's, I think, one of the things we're going to see in this year is, with the Biden administration and with how serious the problem has become, what do we decide to do about it? And I don't know if I have the answer. I'm going to learn along with you. I'm going to see what happens.
You just have another question out of what you just said, as far as the groups and their agenda. Are there any medical professionals who push for alternatives other than vaccines? Like someone in the medical community, I believe there is a page out there that speaks to that. I think this person is an orthopedic. I mean, they're different study of medicine, but they share and usher other alternatives. Are there groups out there like that in the medical community who's not for vaccines? Even though that sounds so contradictory.
Yeah, but I think you're right. I think that there are. I've seen it too. Okay. Yeah, it's like there's holistic health practitioners, and and I'm not against that. And I think public health is figuring out, in medicine they're kind of like, it's an ongoing conversation about like what doesn't have any evidence backing it up and what does, and how do we work together. Right. And that's not perfect. It needs to be better. But actually, yeah, there is a really big problem with some kinds of alternative medicine coming out really strongly against vaccines. So, and this is something I think we need to also reconcile with as a country. It's not like, for example, there are a lot of chiropractors that are against vaccines, and not all chiropractors, but it's a lot. And we don't know how to deal with that yet. In my personal opinion, it should be the organizations who credential chiropractors should be concerned about that and should have a say. Like if you're a lawyer and you're out there giving bad legal advice, there's a threat of taking away your right to practice law. And if you're a doctor, a medical doctor, and you're doing bad medicine, they'll take away your ability to practice medicine. I think that should be true for chiropractic as well. But there's other brands of it too. Like you said earlier, there's people who just don't want anything to be put into the body that isn't already in the body. And I kind of get that. I just feel like life is really hard and you have no idea what's going to happen in any given moment. And if there's something that's safe, that's going to keep you and the people you care about safe and healthy, I just would rather do it. That's where I land. Any edge that I can get to be healthier and to be worried about one less thing, I will do.
Makes sense. Thank you. I don't know if Andy, do you have anything else?
One more. I'm so sorry, Joe. One more.
Oh, it's okay.
I saw you one time give a great example of like, here's some misinformation, and then you kind of went backwards and explained the origin. Is there one that comes to mind that you can speak of that you've seen online where you're like, oh, I wish I could be right next to that person reading that, explaining how this went awry?
I think more than one specific example of misinformation. I think one thing to watch out for is I see misinformation every day. And I feel like I've done a decent job on my social media of trying to follow groups that I think are saying the right things and like they're saying the truth, but I still see it every day. And this is aside from the work I do. I'm just talking about on my personal social media accounts. Um, Basically, I think if they're trying to make me feel something, it's probably not true. And if they're trying to get me to believe that there's a conspiracy or they're the only one who has seen the truth, then I feel like it's probably not true. And I always look at that with a lot of skepticism. And so like I think when I see something on NBC, I feel like it's going to be true. If I see something on my Facebook feed that is in meme form, or it's like said by an angry person, or you know, like it's connecting dots that I haven't seen on NBC, then I'm going to go, no, I'm going to wait until NBC covers that, and then I'll believe it. And that's kind of like my general rule of thumb is there's a lot of reporters who spend a lot of time every day trying to confirm whether something is true or not. And they try really hard to only tell the public about the things that are true, and to give them the information that they need to make informed decisions. And scientists do that in their own way as well. So there's what is happening all the time is there's a kernel of truth in the misinformation, and someone takes it and runs with it, and then they'll like beautiful mind it. They'll like connect all these strings on their wall to a whole bunch of stuff that otherwise wouldn't be connected. And so like mRNA, the process that we got these two vaccines so quickly sounds like DNA. So now we have a conspiracy theory and misinformation that it's going to change your DNA when there's no way that it could, but it sounds similar. And it's just like, there's enough there that I'm going to turn it into a thing. And Bill Gates funds vaccines, and he was the head of Microsoft, which makes microchips. And so now there are microchips in vaccines. There's always like this thing that's like true, and then it's sort of blown out of proportion. Or like people in the African American community being concerned about being tested on. That came from really valid concerns because the community has been tested on, but also the kernel that was taken and misconstrued was the people who were making these vaccines tried very hard. Normally there aren't enough Black people in trials to say that it is safe for the Black community to take the vaccine. And they want as many diverse people as they can to be in a trial. And so for this time around, we had the highest participation rate among the Black community than we ever have had in the creation of a vaccine. And the focus on like trying to get people to sign up to be in the trial unfortunately led to this other narrative about, well, they want to use Black people like guinea pigs. So that's another example. Like there's sometimes is like a truth there. And I think particularly with the African-American community, there's also decades, like we talked about, of just horrible things that actually did happen. And so there's layers there that don't exist for like other, like the suburban middle-class white person who's concerned about the vaccine doesn't have as much reason to be concerned about the vaccine because the white community hasn't been targeted by people before, hasn't been mistreated in the same way. So it's complicated, but yeah, at the end of the day, if it shows up on NBC, yeah. If it doesn't, yeah.
That's good stuff. Even to put it down, like you did, as far as the kernels of truth, and they just get exploited.
Yeah.
Kind of walk through that and walk your friends and your family through that. So that's a good outtake or outlook on there's some truth there, but this is really what it is. So appreciate you saying that.
I think it's really brave of you to do this. I know you talked to two people before me. So I just wanted to say, just one-on-one, I think it's really cool that you're doing this. It's a vulnerable thing to be on TV asking questions and admitting that you even have questions and getting answers. So I think that's really great. I don't know if I would have had the courage to do it about something I had questions about. So,
well, you can't pass up on an opportunity like this to hear it from like the horse's mouth. You know what I mean? Instead of just relying on social media.
Yeah.
There's other forms. So just call your judgment. So again, this is great for me. So.
I wanted to offer, if you want to continue the conversation, we track all this misinformation. And so if you kind of want a direct line to what we're seeing every week, if we share our email addresses, I can link you up. And if you're interested in it, you can see what I see.
Okay. That's great. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Andy will link our information together. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Joe. I really appreciate your time. This was really helpful. I learned a lot.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Good.
Yeah. Thank you so much.